Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
My story takes place in the Netherlands during the late 90s. Let's just say that it wasn't always easy as a child of divorced parents. My mom worked hard to provide for us, and I spent most of my afternoons playing outside with the neighborhood kids. We weren't rich, but we had a decent-sized backyard that became the unofficial gathering spot for all the local children. That one summer afternoon started like any other. The sun was blazing, and about 6 of us were playing tag in and around my backyard. I was never the fastest runner, but I made up for it by being clever about my hiding spots and escape routes. One of the boys from 2 houses down, the same one who always had to win at everything, started chasing me. He wasn't playing tag anymore, he was just being mean, shouting that he was going to catch me and push me down. I kept running, weaving between the other kids who had stopped to watch. Then it happened. He was so focused on catching me that he didn't notice the uneven patch of ground. One moment he was right behind me. The next I heard a thud and crying. When I turned around, he was face down on the grass, his knees scraped and dirty. The other kids gathered around him. I asked if he was okay, but instead of answering, he just cried and declared that he was going to tell his mom. He got up and ran home, leaving us all standing there, confused. I wasn't worried. Everyone had seen what happened. But about 10 minutes later, we heard the angry stomping coming down the street. His mother burst through our garden gate. She was dragging her son by the hand, and he was putting on quite a show of limping, even though he'd run home just fine moments ago. She immediately started demanding to know where my mother was. When I quietly told her that my mom was inside, she screamed at me to get her out there right away. My mom must have heard the commotion because she came out still wearing her work clothes. She had just gotten home from her shift at the hospital. She calmly asked if she could help, but the woman launched into an angry tirade, calling me a brat and accusing me of pushing her son down. She demanded that my mom punish me while pointing at her son's scraped knees. My mom calmly asked if this was true. I quickly explained that he had been chasing me and fell on his own. The other kids immediately jumped in to defend me, with one saying that he had been trying to catch me and another confirming that I hadn't done anything wrong. Karen's face went through several shades of red as she realized all the neighborhood kids were backing up my story. But instead of apologizing, she puffed up even more. She started stammering and then resorted to threats, saying she would tell her husband about this and he would come to set us straight. That's when my mom, my sweet, hard-working mom who never raised her voice, took a step forward. She crossed her arms, looked Karen straight in the eyes, and with the most confident smile I'd ever seen, delivered the most legendary line I'd ever heard. She told the woman to go ahead and send her husband, because she would not get him back. The silence that followed was deafening. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Without another word, she grabbed her son's hand and practically ran out of our yard. The other kids burst into giggles as soon as she was gone. That evening, my mom made us all popsicles, and we sat in the backyard talking about what happened. The boy who fell came back later to play as if nothing had happened. Kids are funny that way. We never saw his mom in our yard again, though she would cross the street whenever she saw my mom coming. That day became legendary in our neighborhood. The other parents heard about it and would crack up laughing whenever it was mentioned. My mom never meant it as a threat. She just knew how to stand up to bullies, whether they were kids or adults. Years later, whenever someone asks her about it, she just gives that same confident smile and changes the subject. I learned something important that day, watching my mom handle that situation. She didn't yell, she didn't threaten violence, she just stood her ground with such unwavering confidence that it completely disarmed someone who thought they could push us around. These days, whenever I find myself dealing with difficult people, I think back to that moment and try to channel a bit of my mom's quiet strength. Last weekend was supposed to be a special night for me. I've been working overtime at the hospital for 3 straight weeks, covering for a colleague on maternity leave, and I finally had a weekend off. My spouse surprised me with tickets to see this classic romance film being shown at our local vintage theater. They know I'm a huge fan of old romantic movies, and this particular one was being screened for its 50th anniversary. We got there early enough to get decent seats, right in the middle section, where the view is perfect. The theater was filling up nicely with other couples and families. There was this lovely young family sitting behind us, parents with two kids who looked around 8 and 10. The kids were so well behaved, quietly munching on their popcorn and whispering excitedly about the movie. Everything was perfect until about 5 minutes into the film, when this woman in her mid-40s, wearing what looked like some clothes that were way too young for her, barged in with her oversized purse, making a huge fuss about finding her seat. She ended up sitting 2 rows in front of us, and that's when our nightmare began. The moment the first romantic scene started playing, she jumped up from her seat, literally jumped, and started clapping and squealing like a teenager. I turned to my spouse and whispered, asking if this woman was for real. She wasn't just reacting to the big moments, every single scene got a reaction out of her. She gasped dramatically, make these exaggerated "oh" sounds, and keep standing up to clap, and she wasn't even trying to be quiet about it. The father sitting behind us finally had enough after about 20 minutes. He politely asked her if she could sit down, explaining that his children couldn't see the screen. Karen whirled around sharply and snapped back that she had paid for her ticket just like them and could enjoy the movie however she wanted. The mother tried to intervene, calmly requesting that she just stay seated as she was blocking everyone's view. Karen's response was to flip them both off and tell them to mind their own business, adding that if their brats couldn't see, they should move somewhere else. The parents were clearly shocked, and their kids looked scared. The father started to get up, but his wife grabbed his arm and shook her head, probably thinking about their children. This went on for another excruciating 30 minutes. Every time she stood up, people would groan, but nobody wanted to cause a scene. Then came this really touching scene where the main characters finally get together. As expected, Karen leapt to her feet, shouting excitedly about how that's what she was talking about. 2 projectiles flew at her simultaneously, a large popcorn bucket from the left side of the theater and a cup of beer from the right, hitting her perfectly. She stood there dripping with beer, popcorn stuck all over her expensive-looking outfit, mouth hanging open in shock. The entire theater went quiet for a second, then burst into laughter and applause. But Karen wasn't done. She spun around and immediately zeroed in on the family behind us, probably because they were the only ones who had confronted her earlier. She started screaming, accusing them of throwing the items at her. She started charging towards them, but she didn't get far. A security guard who must have been alerted by all the commotion grabbed her arm. She tried to break free, but he held firm. Karen started yelling at the guard to let her go, claiming that these people had assaulted her. Another staff member rushed in to help as Karen started flailing around wildly. Between the two of them, they managed to restrain her and began dragging her towards the exit. The whole time she was kicking and screaming, threatening to sue everyone and insisting she knew her rights, calling everything assault. The entire theater erupted in cheers and applause as she was removed, even louder than her previous reactions to the movie. The manager came in shortly after and apologized to everyone, offering free passes for another showing. They rewound the film to the scene just before her last outburst, so we wouldn't miss anything. I never found out who threw the popcorn and beer, but they're my heroes. The rest of the movie was perfectly peaceful, and that family behind us could finally enjoy the film properly with their kids. When we were leaving, I overheard the younger child telling their mom that this incident was better than the movie itself, making everyone around laugh. After dropping out of college due to financial struggles, I needed a steady job to support myself. After working there for about a year and a half, I was transferred to a different location that had been operating without a manager. Being one of the more experienced employees, I took on the responsibility of keeping things running smoothly. I knew every aspect of the business, from handling delicate packages to operating the printing equipment and managing our retail section. The higher-ups finally decided to hire a manager, and guess who had to train her? Me. From day one, it was clear she had absolutely no experience in our industry. She didn't know the difference between ground shipping and express, couldn't operate the printing equipment, and had no idea about our packaging guidelines. But what really got under my skin was her obsession with micromanaging everything, especially things that didn't matter. One morning, she called a staff meeting before opening the store. She announced that this week's focus would be Father's Day cards, demanding that we actively promote them to every customer who walked through the door. I tried to explain that it wasn't a good idea, pointing out that greeting cards had never been a priority. She interrupted me, insisting that they were now a priority because she had noticed they weren't selling well enough. I attempted to reason with her, explaining that people mainly came to us for shipping and printing services, and the cards were just supplementary items. She dismissed my concern, demanding that everyone push these cards. When I expressed my discomfort with the idea, explaining that people's relationships with their fathers could be a sensitive topic, she called me ridiculous and told me to stop being difficult. I stood my ground, sharing that I had my own father issues and understood how it felt when people pushed these things. This only made her angrier. She accused me of insubordination and demanded I follow her orders. I refused and suggested she reconsider her approach. She stormed off in a huff, muttering about disrespectful employees. But I knew it wouldn't take long for reality to hit her in the face. Sure enough, her brilliant plan backfired spectacularly that very morning. The first customer was a middle-aged woman who came in to ship a package. Before even addressing the shipping needs, the manager cheerfully tried to promote our Father's Day cards. The customer quietly told her that her father had passed away just last month. The manager's smile faltered, but she didn't learn her lesson. 20 minutes later, she approached another customer with the same enthusiastic pitch about Father's Day cards. This time, the customer coldly told her that his father had abandoned him at age 5 and he'd never heard from him again. He sarcastically asked if she still wanted to sell him a card. I could see the manager getting uncomfortable, but apparently she needed one more lesson. The third customer received the same cheerful pitch about our beautiful Father's Day cards on display. This customer's response was devastating. She revealed that her father had died in a car accident when she was 12, then asked if there was anything else the manager would like to remind her about. Her voice was ice cold as she stared directly into the manager's eyes until she looked away in shame. I've never seen someone's brilliant idea crash and burn so spectacularly in just one morning. After that third encounter, the manager retreated to her office and didn't come out for hours. When she finally emerged, she walked straight to the greeting card display and took down the featured item sign she had put up earlier. She didn't say a word to me, but I noticed she never pushed the greeting cards again. Our regular customers who had witnessed her behavior started asking specifically for me to help them, completely ignoring her presence. Some even made comments within earshot about how they appreciated dealing with someone who understood basic human empathy. Over the next few weeks, her authority diminished significantly. The customer's clear preference for working with me instead of her didn't go unnoticed by our district supervisor during his surprise visit. 2 months later, she was transferred to a different position in the company, one that didn't involve direct customer interaction. I still work at that store, now properly promoted to manager, and we still sell greeting cards. But we let customers find them on their own, just like we always did before Hurricane Karen blew through our store, thinking she knew better than everyone else. I've been looking forward to this play for months. As a theater teacher at the local high school, I make it a point to attend professional productions whenever I can, both for my own enjoyment and to gather inspiration for our school performances. This particular show was a revival of one of my favorite musicals, and I'd splurged on a decent orchestra seat using the money I'd saved from picking up extra rehearsal hours. The theater was packed that evening, which wasn't surprising given the show's stellar reviews. I settled into my seat, program in hand, ready to lose myself in the performance. The first act started brilliantly. The set design was incredible, and the lead actress's voice gave me chills. About 30 minutes in, the man sitting in front of me in one seat to the left suddenly whipped around, clearly raging. He yelled at me to stop kicking his seat, his voice full of venom. I was so startled I nearly jumped out of my skin. His aggressive tone was completely unexpected, especially since I hadn't moved from my position. I quickly told him that I hadn't kicked his seat. He turned back around without another word, but the damage was done. My heart was racing and the magic of the show had been shattered. Instead of focusing on the performance, I found myself sitting rigidly, afraid to move even an inch, lest he accuse me again. Every time he shifted in his seat, I tensed up, wondering if he was about to turn around and yell at me again. When intermission finally came, I decided I couldn't let this go. As a teacher, I spend my days teaching teenagers about conflict resolution and respectful communication. If I couldn't practice what I preached, what kind of example would that set? I leaned forward slightly, keeping my voice gentle and friendly. I asked him how he was finding the play. His response was snide, saying it was good when I wasn't kicking his seat. I calmly asked him how that would have been possible from where I was sitting. That's when his wife, who had been quietly sitting beside him, spoke up and pointed out that it was actually the gentleman sitting next to me who had been kicking the seat, not me. The man grumbled something under his breath, clearly unhappy about being proven wrong by his own wife. I tried to suggest that regardless of who was kicking his seat, there might have been a kinder way to address the situation, but before I could finish, he cut me off. He claimed he had said please, which was completely untrue. I pointed out that fact, telling him directly that he hadn't said please at all. That's when things really exploded. Both he and his wife started yelling at me, their voices rising above the intermission chatter. Several people nearby turned to stare. The man kept insisting that I had been kicking his seat all night, while his wife accused me of being completely unreasonable. I tried to explain that this wasn't about the seat anymore, but about how he had spoken to me, but they wouldn't listen. Finally, the man declared that he was being very nice and that I was the one being unkind, then announced they were leaving. He stood up and started gathering his things. His wife followed suit, but not before shooting me a glare that could have melted steel. When they stormed off, I could hear him complaining loudly to an usher about rude people who don't know how to behave in a theater. The couple sitting behind me, who had witnessed the entire exchange, leaned forward to offer their support. The woman assured me that they had seen everything and confirmed that I hadn't been kicking any seats. She mentioned that while the guy next to me had been fidgeting a bit, even that wasn't bad enough to warrant such a reaction. Her husband agreed and advised me not to let angry people ruin my night. When the second act began, I found myself with a much better view since the angry couple hadn't returned to their seats. Their attempt to ruin my evening had actually improved it. The next day, I even used this experience as a teaching moment in my drama class, discussing the importance of civil discourse and how not to behave in a theater. A week later, I received an unexpected email from the theater's customer service. Apparently, the couple had tried to demand a refund, claiming they were forced to leave because of a disruptive patron. The theater had reviewed the security footage from our section and denied their request, as it clearly showed I hadn't been kicking any seats. They even offered me a discount on tickets for their next production as an apology for the disruption to my evening. I'd say karma worked its magic pretty well that night. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.